The Champions League final is set. It's Manchester City against Inter. By the look of things, absolutely everybody has City slated for a massive victory, but it might not be that simple. So let's take a look at Inter. Let's take a look at what Pep Guardiola is going to be up against and what might hurt them in the final. So here we've got Inter in their 3-5-2, or some might call it a 5-3-2, depending on what phase of the game they're in. They do like to defend deep, and that's probably where you start when you're describing Inter. They are a compact team. Listen to any single one of their players talk about Simone Inzaghi's tactical philosophy and how they play, and they will say the word compact. It is everywhere. They're counter-attacking, they're compact, and they thrive without the ball, which is kind of important when it comes to playing against Manchester City. In this 3-5-2, the wing-backs like to get forward where possible, but not all the time. The centre-backs stay in the centre, and the central midfielders drop off the ball into a very, very compact column of 6 players. They block out the central zones really, really nicely and create this barrier here, which is really hard to play against. Milan had exceptional trouble with this in the semi-final. They could not break through the centre of the pitch. And up front, we've got the old warhorse, Edin Dzeko, and his partner in crime, Lautaro Martinez. Extremely traditional strike partnership. Dzeko's the big man. He likes to win the aerials. He likes to rough up the centre-backs. And Lautaro just kind of floats in this general area here and tries to pick up any of the loose pieces. And Inter's first thought here is to try and put the ball into this general area, see if Dzeko can win it, see if Lautaro can get the second ball. It's pretty rudimentary, but it kind of works. So let's take a look at how these two teams are going to match up in the final on the tactics board. And this is roughly what I expect. I mean, these two teams play with roughly the same 11 nowadays, and they're not going to change too much heading into a Champions League final. Please take notes, Pep. But this is the 3-5-2 for Inter, and this is Manchester City's off-the-ball formation. We usually put it in a 4-2-3-1, but once we know they get into sustained possession, Gundogan will move into this line, De Bruyne will move over to this half space, Rodri, confusingly, will move from right centre-mid to left centre-mid, and John Stones will join him up here, which brings these three into a back three. You've got the 5 in the defensive phase, and you've got the 5 in the attacking phase. And the reality of the situation is this: Inter are not going to have much of the ball, and they don't really care about that. In fact, they're happy with that, and that's going to bring them all the way back here. Çalhanoğlu probably sitting here in front of Acerbi, Mkhitaryan blocking this lane, Barella blocking this lane, and Dzeko on the halfway line with Lautaro just off him, and pushes all these players into these areas here and brings the centre-backs for Man City all the way up as well. So this is basically the pattern of the game. It's going to be played in Inter's half. The problem here for City is, as we saw with Real Madrid in the first leg, they were very aggressive with him, Rudiger in particular, all over him man-to-man. And we saw Modric and Valverde blocking in the half spaces and making sure that the central column of the pitch was really hard to breach. That is going to be the same here. In fact, it's going to be even harder because these players are even better at it than Real Madrid's players. So if you thought Erling Haaland struggled to get involved in the game in the first leg of the Real Madrid game, this might be quite similar. And the key for Pep is to find a way to get him more involved. And it's not simply going to be just to swing crosses into the box, because Erling Haaland will be up against these 3 titans of industry. They're absolutely massive. If Olivier Giroud can't get anything out of them, then Erling Haaland may not be able to either. So the first key for Man City in terms of attacking this game and on-the-ball approach is, how do we get Erling Haaland involved? Or if we can't, how do we make sure that we pose a credible threat to goal without him? Now, I'm not saying they can't do that. They have De Bruyne here, they have Gundogan here, they can get their players all the way up. Bernardo Silva was absolutely unbelievable at the Etihad against Real Madrid. But they need to make sure they've got that bit sorted, because if they don't, they might have trouble breaking down this low block. By the way, just as an aside, this Inter midfield makes absolutely no sense on paper whatsoever. And you look at how it's set out and you just think, there's no way that that should work. I mean, for starters, the fact that Çalhanoğlu has managed to emerge as one of the better deep-lying midfielders in European football is beyond belief, to be honest with you. For a long time, a number 10, a free kick specialist, a very majestic player, but not that, absolutely not that whatsoever. And while Barella is absolutely fine in this position, it's what he plays for Italy, it's what he's always played for Inter. Mkhitaryan here as well as a box-to-box midfielder is definitely something, but it definitely works. And he's got the industry to move up and down and up and down. And all the while, Marcelo Brozovic, one of the absolute best number 6s in world football, he's just sat on the bench. Like, how can I not get into this team? Despite the fact that it doesn't make sense on paper, it really works for Inzaghi and it really works for how Inter play. So that is just another curiosity to Inter's style. So it's all good Inter defending well and keeping City at bay, but they are going to have to provide some kind of credible threat on goal if they hope to score a goal and maybe win this final. So let's talk about how Inter can actually move up the pitch and get the ball into the positive territory that they need in order to do that. And it's safe to say they're actually set up a little bit better to do that than maybe Real Madrid were, which sounds very weird to say when consider they have Kroos and Modric and some wonderful midfield players. But against Manchester City's press and counter-press, it's very, very difficult to get out of your own third, let alone into the opposition third. And what we saw in the Madrid game was, unbelievably, Modric, Kroos, Camavinga, these guys really struggling to play through Manchester City's press. So obviously they're very active from the front. We have Erling Haaland who moves across and De Bruyne sometimes joins him. Gundogan is active too. Stones and Rodri, though, this is the key. They move into this central column of the pitch, and whenever someone tries to play through them, they just take it off you. They win all the second balls. And they're winning the second balls in this general area here. They're pushing all the way up, and they're making sure that you can't get the ball past your own third into the middle third. And Madrid had no option really but to try and play through them because they don't have anyone to clip the ball to. They can't play over the press. Benzema had a nightmare of a game against the centre-backs on the halfway line, and he wasn't really equipped for the physical battle. Absolutely not something you can say about this man, Edin Dzeko, who absolutely thrives on this stuff. And I expect Inter to completely skip this part of the pitch in build-up and just pop the ball straight into his waiting feet. And he'll be really happy with that. And so will Lautaro, who will be hanging around this general area and trying to pick up those second balls. And Mkhitaryan will be surging forward and trying to pick up those runs and try to see the layoffs. And that's where DiMarco comes into play as well. He pushes forward very aggressively from the left-hand side. Once the ball goes into Dzeko, he lays it off to DiMarco and they start running. So, Madrid couldn't do this. And again, it's pretty basic stuff. But if you don't have the player that can win the ball on the halfway line, you can't rustle up the centre-backs and you can't win those 50-50s, you cannot play this way. But Dzeko absolutely can. So if Inter can get the ball to here, well, they can absolutely then get the ball into this half of the pitch. So this is key. And Dzeko will only play about 60 minutes because, frankly, he's only got 60 minutes in his legs nowadays, but he'll give you absolutely everything he can for an hour. And then they'll bring him off. And then they'll bring Lukaku on, who'll do the other 30 minutes. It's a bit like the starter-finisher paradigm that Sabrina Wiegman coined at the Women's Euros. It's perfect. It's absolutely brilliant. And because they're so committed to their roles and playing one half and then the other, it just works. The teamwork is fantastic. And this is something that Pep can't really do anything about. Like, you can't really stop this from happening. They're just going to kick it up to Dzeko. And he just has to ask his players on the halfway line, Ruben Dias, Kyle Walker, Manuel Akanji, you've got to do your best to keep him under control and stop them from countering us and skipping over our press. Now, compounding the issue here for Pep is that Inter's goalkeeper, Andre Onana, has incredible distribution. He's one of the best ball-playing goalkeepers in world football. And what Inter do from not just goal kicks, but open play when they move the ball back to Onana, it's really simple, but it's also really effective. They give him 4 options to utilise in playing the ball over longer distances, and he can basically pick any one of the 4 that he likes. The primary target is Edin Dzeko. So that's a straight and long ball up to Dzeko. As I said, Lautaro will probably try and feed off those second balls if Dzeko can't win it himself or win it cleanly, but if he can bring it down, all the better. We also have the idea of the wing-backs pushing a bit further up and a bit wider and trying to utilise this ball out to maybe Denzel Dumfries, who's much too big for his size and isn't really a wing-back. I think he thinks he's a striker, to be honest with you, but he plays wing-back and he does a very good job of winning those aerials. You've also got Nico Barella, who is surprisingly, well, not surprisingly feisty, but surprisingly good at bringing these balls down too. So if he can move into this right half space and push in between the wide man and the central midfielder and take a ball down, that's perfect. The 4th option, of course, is to go to the other side and to hit DiMarco if that's where the space is. So this is all pretty simple stuff, but ultimately, if you make the pitch as wide as possible and as deep as possible, you push Dzeko all the way up and you push DiMarco and Dumfries all the way to the flanks and make that space as big as possible. You may have Barella mopping up in this general area as well. You give Onana 4 very distinctly different targets and you unlock his passing range. You unlock the fact that on the ball, he can flip his hips from left to right and use either foot, and he can chip the ball over the press, he can chip it over a man, he can even shimmy round the player. I wouldn't recommend that on a Champions League final setting, but it can happen if you absolutely need it to. And this is another thing that should give Pep some nightmares because he likes a well-tuned press. He likes to control the game from that aspect. And if Onana's chipping the ball over all of his plays, he's going to get really annoyed. Now, we've seen with Pep over the last 2-3 games in the Champions League knockouts, he's had a specific pressing plan for each opponent. He's also tweaked the pressing plan when it's not working in specific games, like the Bayern Munich game in the first leg, where he changed the way Grealish was pressing and it gave up Upamecano nightmares. It's very possible that he'll have a specific plan to press Onana, and then he might have to use plan B at half-time because it genuinely might not work. It's been so difficult for teams to get at Onana and therefore get at Inter in these general areas because he's so good at reading the passage of play and clipping it over. And it's no coincidence really that they've kept so many clean sheets on this run to the final and been so difficult to break down. It's partially because they defend deep and they defend in numbers and they block out the centre of the pitch, but it's also they don't really make mistakes and don't get caught. And that's the superpower of Onana. So to me, those are the keys to this game tactically. Inter, very comfortable in a compact low block, very comfortable without the ball. Pep's going to have to figure out how to counteract that, how to attack the centre of the pitch, and how to get Erling Haaland involved, because that will be Inter's #1 priority and goal for this game. Make sure Erling Haaland does not have a kick. Moving on from that, Inter will need to focus on getting that ball into Dzeko, and Pep's going to have to come up with a plan for that. How do you press them when Onana is so good on the ball? How do you press them when they can just chip it over to the big man and get you turned? And how do they deal with that battle on halfway? Edin Dzeko, Lautaro Martinez, they cause defenders nightmares. Yes, City are secure on the ball, but this is going to be really tough. I think this game feels like a 1-0 win to Inter and they nick it, or a 4-0 win to City, to be honest with you. I mean, I can see it either way. I don't think there's any middle ground. Maybe none of this is relevant. Maybe the quality tells, but we'll have to see.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.